What's going on, everybody? 401 Jake here. Excited today because we have a special guest. I am thrilled because this guy, Joey Ossey, I want to say Ossey, but it's Ossey. He is one of the, I would say, the top, one of the top influencers in the 401k space because he's doing something special. He's got his own brand called Retirement Rockstars. We're going to dive into that. I'm super happy to have him here today. Let's kill this sound so we can talk today. Joey. I want to have you give us a quick background, a little bit about yourself, how you ended up in this space. Give us kind of the genesis story of Joey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jake, first of all, thank you so much again for having me today. I've always enjoyed all the content you put on social media. It's been awesome to connect over the last couple months and do something like this. As you say quite a bit, I'm a total 401k nerd. I got into this business in 2008 at Merrill Lynch, like a lot of us did.
Started right in the middle of a crisis, right? Like right in the, has it happened yet when you started, or was it just starting to?
I was in a cube in the middle of my office studying for my Series 7 the day the flash crash happened. And every broker comes out of their office looking like they just saw a ghost. And I'm thinking, what in the world did I just get myself into?
That's crazy.
So we, pushed through that. And my first big 7-figure account was a 401k plan. I stumbled into it. It was a total accident. I had a business owner friend that I had known and worked with for a long time personally. And he mentioned to me, hey, we've got a 401k. It's old. I don't understand all these moving parts. Can you help me pull it apart? I said, sure, I'll give it my best. And my mentor at Merrill at the time happened to be a 401k specialist. So he helped me, pull it apart. It was the first time I was introduced to bundled versus unbundled. Funds that had 12B1 fees in them. All the different line items now that are somewhat normal, I guess you'd say, that you and I look through, but As overwhelming as could be. So we transitioned it from their current provider to a new one because their old provider was just a little bit out of date. Yeah. And during this whole process, we did education for the participants, some group meetings, some one-on-ones, and things are going really well. And 6 months in, I get a call from the administrator going, hey, I just want to let you know that this client failed ADP and ACP testing, and you're going to have this conversation. And I said, wait a minute, go back and talk to me about what those things are. And so that was
nice.
That was one of my first interactions with this client and the board, having to deliver some not great news on a subject that was new to me. What I found myself doing was just diving in because this just interested me like crazy. I loved the plan design. I loved seeing how the mechanics of compliance testing worked. But most importantly, the education with all of his employees was ultimately the thing that grabbed me and really kept me wanting to continue the 401ks.
Nice. I think a lot of us fall into that trap where we get pulled into it and then we think it's going great. And then something bad like that happens where, oh, you failed testing. I had the same experience where I had to go and tell them they failed top heavy. This business owner was like, why did I even start this thing? I mean, he was so angry that he even had the plan in place, but he had no choice. I mean, he literally had to hunt down someone he had fired to give them some more money.
Yeah.
So
uncomfortable. You know how it goes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think I lost, I found out this news on a Friday afternoon, and I didn't have it in me to call him that Friday afternoon. I'm like, give myself the weekend, make sure I convey this, the right way. I think I slept for 4 hours total. And when I conveyed the news, he goes, okay, that's not so bad. And we, had a conversation about it. And I realized right away that most of the business owners we deal with in the committees, if you walk them through it, you explain it to them, they get it. That just kind of catapulted me into wanting to learn more about 401ks, 403bs, non-qualified. And I had moved over to Morgan Stanley Smith Barney because they had a team there that's all they did, where they were called corporate retirement directors. And the younger partner of the two, good friend of mine, guy by the name of Dan Palouse, who runs the retirement division for Wintrust now, he is a few years older than me, and he kind of took me under his wing and said, if this is what you want to do, I'll help you. You know, we could use some extra help on our team when it comes to servicing, education. I know you're not afraid to talk to people and to get up in front of them. So let's see if we can make this work. And, you know, fast forward to now, it has been an awesome ride the last decade. I can't believe I'm saying it's been over a decade. Thousands of education meetings, investment reviews. But in the middle of that, I spent almost 5 years of my career as a relationship manager with Principal. And it was right at the onset of 408B2, 40485, that switched to zero revenue. So there was all these changes going on that I just got lucky and happened to be right in the thick of things with some great advisors. And that's where I really learned all different facets of our industry, what I liked, what I gravitated more towards, but it always just came back to education.
Interesting. So you kind of, it's an interesting path because you took it from kind of the big wirehouse format of I think a different approach. Cause I mean, I worked for a couple of big ones. I worked for Goldman Sachs, wasn't in retirement at the time. If I had, maybe I'd still be there, but I don't thrive. I found over the years, I don't thrive in big cultures like that. I do better in small ones. Did you find that as you shifted through different firms that there was one that, you know, different cultures you liked more? I mean, was the wirehouse, because you kind of went more towards the record keeper side, was that consciously like because you want to do education, or was it just, how'd you go down that road? Because you've never actually been a full like advisor independent, right, on your own?
No, I have not. I did join an RIA team for a short period of time, not that long ago here. Wasn't a good fit. But back then what had happened was, unfortunately, that partnership I mentioned got a little muddy and they decided to disband. Mm-hmm. And at the time, you know, the big, you're right, the corporate culture, the big, huge machine, so to speak, we were limited on providers we could work with, the size of plans that we could write if we didn't have X amount of assets under management. And if we did have to do, let's say, a $10 million plan, if we were lucky enough to find one, I would have to pull in someone else that was considered a specialist at the time to even write that business. So relationships are the most important thing to me. That's why, you know, gravitating to being a relationship manager was kind of natural. But I realized exactly what you mentioned, that this is personal to me. Everything I do, everything I touch, I take very, very seriously. And I didn't feel as though I had as much control. So I wanted to kind of expand the horizons away from being an advisor. And I was fully licensed at the time, but I thought this was a perfect opportunity for me to cut my teeth on every issue, nuance, anything you can imagine, with 60 clients ranging from 3 to 100 million. And, you know, in plan size, you see a little bit of everything. And I feel like that's where the term I use, that's where I really grew up.
Nice. Okay. I like that. I've always been fascinated by the variety of personalities that come through the door from the providers we use, right? Whether it's TPA, record keeper, DCIO, whoever. Like, it's interesting because they all kind of have their own unique approach. Mm-hmm. And some, you can tell they care a lot more than others. And so that's what's unique about you, is that there's so much passion behind what you do, to the point you've started this whole other brand, which I want to hear a lot more about, because I think it's fascinating that you're still working with a large record keeper, right? And so Tell me a little bit about that balance, what Retirement Rockstars is, and where you're trying to go with it, and how you figure out, you know, the best way to do both things essentially in your day.
You know, it's more, right now, it's more of what I'll call the conceptual stage. And the idea behind it is, I was working for another large record keeper shortly after Principal, where I was traveling on a plane 4 or 5 days a week doing almost all one-on-one meetings. And as I'm doing the one-on-one meetings, which, you know, I've told you I love doing, because that's where you can really make an impact. And you
people open up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They don't tell you in a group meeting. You get a one-on-one, you find out stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And it was a situation where you had 30 minutes, of which I always would go over. I know that it's probably a huge shock. So my schedule would be, you know, 15, 20 minutes behind. But what I realized is that was where, you know, the analogy I use is that we can build a corporate client the best 401k plan, the best Cadillac you can imagine, right? But if those employees have no idea how to drive it or where to even go with it, it's useless. So what I was realizing is a lot of these bigger clients, I was meeting with their employees, they had awesome plans. They had a great match, they had great technology, great tools. They just didn't know how to use it. So I specifically remember this one meeting, and I will remember this for the rest of my life. I was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, met with a gal who had been with this company for 40 years. And she was about a month from retirement. So she comes in to meet with me one-on-one, and she's so excited. And we're opening up her account, just getting to know each other a little bit. And I wear my heart on my sleeve. I don't hide my emotions very well. And as I'm opening up her account, my eyes must have popped out of my head. And right, a month before retirement, let's just say the asset allocation was completely backwards from where it should have been. And long story short, we took care of what we needed to do together. But at the end of the meeting, she stood up, gave me a hug, and she goes, "Young man, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for your help." And I'm a softie, Jake, and I had tears in my eyes, and I'm thinking, man, it's so fulfilling. But when she used that term rock star, and my background a little bit, by no means was I a rock star, but I played drums since I was a little guy. I got to live my dream shortly after I graduated from college and recorded a record and toured. And playing drums is my favorite thing in the world. So I'm on the plane home thinking, all right, how in the world can I combine two things I love more than anything? Playing drums and 401ks, because not any of that statement goes together, not at all. So I'm scribbling down on a notepad, and all of a sudden the term retirement rock stars came to mind, because the rock star piece, I put the K around it.
Yep.
And I've got this notebook full of ideas. And I remember thinking, well, you like that, but that might be silly to others. And it was just something that kept coming back to me. I kept thinking about, all right, if I focused on a concept that was purely, educational driven, how do I turn every participant that I get the chance to spend time with into a retirement rock star? And I started kind of going backwards on how I wanted to approach this. So probably a year and a half ago from now, like most of us do when we want to run an idea past someone, we call JD. And I remember being on the phone with JD and running this idea past him, and he was, I like it, but think about a couple of these different things, reverse engineer it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And over the last years, as I've been fortunate enough to work with, in my opinion, one of the greatest record keepers in the industry, this is something, I do for fun, in my own time, to think about how can we make education as an industry better, more meaningful, and more effective for all those people we get the chance to get in front of. And if we're not, that individual or that client is not ours, we don't get to meet with them. So it was all about taking those 30-minute meetings that, I had hundreds of, and going, I would have done this differently because of this situation, and just putting a lot of ideas together. And what I realized conceptually was people liked two things: simplicity, and they loved analogies. Because when you and I can talk shop all day about 401ks, but when I start even using terms such as contribution, deduction, Roth versus traditional, you can see eyes cross sometimes. And at that moment, I realized, hey, you have to think of a way to put this in a perspective where any kind of person, no matter what background they come from, can understand what you're trying to say. So hence what I sent you last night was one of the first analogies I came up with. I drew a drum set on a whiteboard, and I walked people through what I call the 401k tune-up. 5 things if we're going to meet one-on-one, provided you don't come into that meeting with a specific agenda or something you want to talk about. Here's the 5 things I want to make sure we hit. Because even if you walk out of that meeting and we don't make any changes, but we reviewed all of those and they're in good shape, I know I did my job. I know that person's going to be in a good spot.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get that on my computer and pull it up here in a second. But I loved it. I mean, that's what I think is fascinating about what you're doing, because I had the reverse early in my career of an experience of a record keeper coming in to provide education, do an enrollment meeting, right? Because that's what I thought everybody did, because that's the only way you can scale anything, right? Is you've got to have the record keeper take everything off your plate, so all you're doing is selling. And that meeting went terrible. I mean, just horrible. And nobody enjoyed it. It didn't motivate anybody to take any action. It was literally just like, check a box. This is your 401k, which was the same experience I had early in my life. My very first job, right out of high school, I sat in a 401k meeting, had the same experience personally. And I didn't do the 401k. And so I saw that happening right before my eyes. And I was like, we got to change this. Like, this is ridiculous. And so what I love about what you're doing is you're not only are you putting your passion, you're bringing what you love in with what two things you love, right, together. You're making impact on tons and tons of people, and you're not afraid to put yourself out there. Like, most people just play within the lines, or like, you know what, I have my job, I come in, I'm very conservative in what I say and showing any energy. But you're outside of that, which we need to see more of. Like, people not afraid to be themselves and to do something like what you're doing, because someone in compliance might balk at that, right? Like, I don't know. We could dig more into that, but that drives me crazy, because you see so much talent being, I guess, stopped by the big companies, which is sad. So,
and I'll leave this. Forgive my interjection, Jay. I just want to hop in on that, because that always strikes a nerve with me. The record keeper I mentioned that I worked for at the principal, when you would get requested back by that client, to me and you, that's the ultimate compliment, right? Because those people are getting familiar and comfortable with you. And it was very difficult for them to honor that, just because of the sheer size and scope of the organization. So, you'd spend 3-4 days out there getting to meet people. And by the second or third day, you walk through the door, even if they didn't know, hey, that's Joey, but like, yeah, that's our 401k guy. I always wanted to remain approachable. The energy that I would try to tamper in a group meeting, I couldn't get out of my own way. And I'd get through the first or second slide, and I'd get real excited, and I'd turn around, and it would really depend on my audience, but sometimes they'd be like, wow, you got a lot of energy, man. And what I realized was it's good to have that energy, but knowing your audience was important too. But also, I took that and changed the first phrase in a group meeting. And I said, listen, despite my energy, because like you, Jake, I'm a Mountain Dew addict as well. Despite my energy, I'm not here to sell you anything. My objective is just to get you somewhat as excited as I am about what's going on and why this is important to you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so I just pulled up your graphic here. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
I think it was awesome because, one, I grew up in the 90s, so Blink-182 was a big part of my teenage years before they were like the biggest thing ever, but and definitely know the others as well. But I think what's fascinating is you threw songs in with basically things that most people don't understand in the 401k, right? But they know songs. And so I think it's really unique, the approach here to say, here's a song. It's kind of like what Blink-182 was saying with your investments, like what's my age again, right? Like, who else is going to think of stuff like this? And how many more people are going to actually connect in this way? A ton more than if you just show a boring PowerPoint that compliance created. I got to stop knocking compliance. I love compliance. I was a compliance officer once. So I don't know. Do you want to add anything to this and go through it at all? I think it's great.
And thank you again. I do appreciate the kind words more than you know, because this is just something that it's my baby, because I want people to see the importance and the impact that taking advantage of a benefit through their employer can have for the rest of their life. And so, as most of us do, my wife Heather is incredibly supportive, but she hears the term 401k way too much and just rolls her eyes eventually. Sorry, hon.
All my wife sees is these hats all the time now. She's like, constant K interface.
Oh, Jake, when that hat went on, Heather's like, you kidding me? Really? But it was one of those where I thought about her, because if I could get her attention and get her kind of leaning into, what we're talking about, that was going to be something that was important to me, because I wanted to appeal to, again, any demographic across the board. And when you're making analogies, to me, I might not remember the details of the analogy, but I will remember the analogy. And so the first time I took a chance and threw this up on the screen for a presentation, I had about 50 people in the room, and they just smile because they're reading the lyrics. They're thinking, yeah, that makes sense. And to be totally transparent, my favorite one, albeit it's the most morbid subject, is the beneficiary one. That one made me laugh, because we've got to think of a non-morbid way to talk about that subject, because that's something that doesn't get taken care of a lot.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'd have maybe 15, 20 minutes of a group session to get people interested in a one-on-one meeting. And instead of going through, as you mentioned, that kind of run-of-the-mill deck of 4 or 5 slides, I wanted to put one slide up, introduce myself, tell them who I am, where I come from, why I love music so much. And so, one, they know who the guy is talking to them. He's a human being that, here's his interests. But at the end of the day, those concepts up there, if they're going to meet with me, this is what we're going to talk about. What this wound up doing was getting people more interested in, well, what does investments have to do with Blink-182 and what's my age again? And they'd start to ask questions like that. And so when we come into a meeting and we meet one-on-one, I always kept that on the table so they could see it. And we go to, any one of the 5 topics, and ultimately walk through why all of these were so important. And with the technology that our industry has now, there's so many great apps, tools, websites out there that we can utilize with participants in real time that we weren't able to do in the past. And so all of that played into the ability to have a meaningful conversation in a one-on-one meeting, but also kind of show them the importance of, hey, you may have assigned a beneficiary 12 years ago when you were right out of college and single, but have things changed? Are you married? Do you have kids? Anything in that regard. And they go, you know what? I haven't thought about that in a long time. Let's make sure we get it. So this was just, selfishly, it was a piece that made me smile, because anytime I see a drum set, that's a good day. But it made people think about these terms in a different, conceptual way.
Yeah, that's totally true. Because these terms we say them so much that they become normal for us, and we lose sense of what, your clients, your participants are actually understanding. And most people don't want to admit that they don't understand this stuff. And so you have to really read the room and understand your ability to communicate with them and to relate to them in ways that they care about. Because you're going to have, the best thing I can see is if you get 1 or 2 participants really into this, and they're the ones that are backing you up and almost dumbing it down for people. I mean, I'm constantly doing that, even just within our own office with our other advisors on personal meetings. I'm constantly just making sure the connection's being made between the actual client and our advisor.
Definitely.
And that's not always easy to do, but the more that you do that, and I guess get away from the cold corporate brand. I mean, I think that's where record keepers have tried to scale, is using technology, giving us calculators to know that, how much monthly you're going to have in retirement, which is helpful, but it's just a guess. Mm-hmm. And making it more human. And I think that's what the path you're on is, you're making it more human, which people connect with better than some whiteboard video, or, you know what I'm saying? I can't stand that cold corporate brand that we all kind of see all the time. Because I mean, look how many people follow Dave Ramsey. I mean, it's a good example. He's one guy, but look how much he's scaled in his ability to influence people to make decisions. They're not always right. I don't agree with everything he says, but he's done it. So why can't we see more of that in the 401k space? Why does it have to be all so cold and black and white? Yeah, which is why I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jake. It's putting yourself in the participant's shoes, which I know you do a lot. And at the end of the day, a question I would get a lot from people when I was, again, in this position was when we would talk about rollovers. Did it or did it not make sense? And usually the phrase that would come out of that participant's mouth next was, well, you're the so-and-so guy. Of course you want me to roll my money from this provider to that provider. And what that made me think is, yeah, I could see why they think that. And having some sort of independence with this, not being tied to a specific record keeper, but more so making sure they're aware of their best interest is always in mind, as it should be. It goes without saying.
Yeah.
But when I would just come right out and say that to people, or we do a cost analysis, and I'd say, listen, it would make more sense for you in your specific situation to think about maybe leaving that where it is for fees or whatever. You started to see people open up more and come out of their shell, because when you are energetic and you're passionate, a lot of times people will think, what's under the hood? What are you trying to hide and sell? But the biggest compliment I ever got paid by a participant who was the opposite of my personality was, he goes, you were a lot for me the first time we met, but you're always the same guy, and your sincerity bleeds through. And to this day, what we do every day, Jake, how the clients we meet with, and whether it's the smallest employer, biggest one, it doesn't matter. If you're yourself, you're sincere, you have their best interest in mind, the rest takes care of itself, brother.
Exactly. I mean, that goes back to even just when you look at like Gary Vee, for example, he's really a lot to take in at the beginning. And most people are like, whoa, this guy's crazy. Yeah. And then you get to know his message, and it's always the same. And if you can do that, bring that passion, and you can be an introvert and still be a really good high energy person.
Definitely.
I think that's what throws people off. Like, well, I don't want to make videos for LinkedIn. Well, don't then. Write then. If you like to write, do that. There's ways you can get your information out that that's helpful to people in whatever medium you want. And that's where I think we all kind of feel like we could do more, but we get caught up in the day-to-day. I hate getting caught up in the day-to-day. My email box, I'm never been more grateful than I have right now than for my awesome operations manager, Jessica. She runs my email. I jump in there a couple times a day, but she throughout the day is checking it and telling me if there's some fire I need to jump in on right now. And she's prepping some things for me. And that has really freed up my time to be, I feel like, a much bigger impact on our plans and our participants, because now I'm able to put more content out. I'm able to focus on the things that I love to do more rather than just get in the weeds, which you got to do sometimes. I'm not saying that it's not important, but as a 401k advisor, your time is going to get sucked out of your life too fast if you're not proactive on what you want to do with it.
And that is a perfect segue into another reason why this was formulated, was that I noticed a lot of retirement plan teams, at least in the Chicago area, that were, again, what I would refer to as retirement plan specialists. They were looking for new business. Sending one or two of their team members out to do education for 3-4 days wasn't exactly the best ROI for them. And they also thought, I want to know who's going out there to represent me as the advisor in front of my client talking with these people. Yeah. And, sometimes they would get, lucky and have the same representative from whatever record keeper they worked with. But they wanted some stability in who, again, they were putting in front of their clients that were ultimately meeting with participants. Because if an advisor wanted to take retirement rock stars out to meet with one of their clients, we're representing them 100% of the way through. And what was interesting to me as I started to, just do more homework and take notes on ideas that I had was the advisor community, I thought, was really going to not like this concept at first, because it would be looked at as competition and right. Joey's trying to take away one of our value adds. If you're a 401k advisor that has education as a part of your service model, you'll never see me trying to talk to your client. I'm staying out of the way completely, because once I know that client's in good hands, that they're good to go. Yeah. Where this got interesting to me was advisors saying, this is helpful to me, because now I can I've got a consistent individual that if we make any changes to plan design, investment options, fees, I can relay that to them. And then hypothetically, that can get relayed out to the client. And it frees up their time more. So I'm typically not a pessimistic guy, as you can tell. But my fear was, I don't want folks in this industry that I love and have a great amount of respect for to think I'm trying to step on their toes.
That you couldn't, yeah, that's so important because we see that all the time. And I think the big push right now, the 338 was a big push for a while, right? And then all of a sudden it went to managed accounts. What you're talking about is not managed accounts. This is education, which is very different than what we're seeing be the trend now. And I struggle with managed accounts, right? I have a different approach, but I still see the value and but I think fundamentally going back to your base of who is your niche, who's your target market, what do you need to do to bring them actual value? Not what you think is a value add, but like really value. If you're in this massive enterprise market with thousands of participants, you can't have that custom one-on-one face-to-face time, but you could use technology and still be a pretty strong personality to influence them to do things. But what you're doing is helping those people that don't even want to do that, but know they need it. And that's incredible because I think advisors just struggle to know where to spend their time, right? They need to know their talents, know what they love to do and know what they're good at and double down on that. Don't try to be like everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, exactly. I love chasing plans. And if I could do that all day long, that's all I would do. But I also love doing content. So if I can do those two things and not deal with rollovers, I'm happy. And not that I can't do a rollover and not that I don't know how to go through all that with somebody.
Sure.
I just would rather spend my energy on other things. And so advisors need to double down on what they're good at and feel comfortable and not feel guilty of offloading other things like that.
I
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And we come from, again, what I refer to in my demographic as, 10 years ago, there was more generalists that were the broker of record or the advisor over 401ks. Now it's since flipped and gone into specialists, which, biasly, of course, I think that's a good thing. But now, to your point, Jake, it's starting to segment more. It's not just having a third-party administrator like plan design consultants overseeing the document. It's, in my opinion, I want all stars. I want someone who's an expert here, who's a great ERISA attorney, that I know that we've got a great team in place and we can call on any of those folks to come in and do exactly what you said. Focus on what you're good at, but more importantly, what you love doing, and people can see that.
Yeah. And knowing your niche is so key in putting that team together. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what's a struggle. It took me a while to figure that out. Is I was guilty of trying to find the best deal. You should not start there. Yes, fees are important. I'm never going to do something just because it costs more, but you get a tremendous difference of value of actual help and guidance from a real good TPA versus one that's a few $100 cheaper. I mean, it is night and day difference. Same with record keepers. I mean, you've got this interesting, and I spent some time, as you know, in this low cost scaling small business focus. And what I found is that that's only a very small part of the market. And some people will like that. Some companies are all for that, but there's a bigger problem here. There's a bigger problem with helping advisors get all the help they need to be successful. And that's going to be unique to each one of them. Yeah. So that's what I'm pumped about with Foreman Jake and what we're doing with Retirement Rockstars is we can help provide some real help and some real push to get advisors to do a better job, which in the end, the ultimate why is to see better participant outcomes. I mean, that is ultimately, I have a family, I have 5 kids. I want to spend more time with them. I realize the 401k is not going to be the only solution that gets us to retirement. And I'm trying to live a life that I don't regret putting off for, hoping for this big retirement one day. Like I'm trying to find that balance. And I think that's a pretty strong trend right now is people are shifting from this, I'm going to travel and see the world when I'm 65. That's kind of out of date now. And people want to enjoy it more now while they're young. And I totally agree. So how do you fit your 401k into that whole puzzle is unique depending on what that person does for work.
Yeah, it's correct me on this if you think I'm wrong, but where I used to think if you were the cheapest, you were going to win, clients are looking at what they're getting for what they're paying. You know,
Right.
if you go into a finance, so as a relationship manager, I'd often go with our VP of sales to do finalist presentations with him because that client wanted to meet their RM and the person doing education. And I remember 60% of the meetings, we were not even close to the low cost. We were in the middle, if up on the higher end of that. But if that client felt compelled and good with who they're working with, the product and all those things together, they didn't mind spending a little bit more money.
Yeah.
And, you know, take that down towards the participants now. When you're talking to people about, I always ask the same question to folks if I'm meeting them for the first time. Just tell me what your ideal retirement looks like. Give me your best case scenario, and we're going to work backwards. And some of the stories I get just crack me up. But you get everything from what you mentioned to I want to travel the world, I want to be on a yacht, blah, 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 to, hey, I kind of just want to stay home and hang out with my grandkids because I didn't have a lot of time to do that over the last 20 years. And as we know, a lot of that is going to result in a different amount of income they need. And how do they get there? So they knew where they wanted to be eventually, but they had no clue the roadmap on how to get there. And if they logged on to the technology, more people than not would see these, you know, these numbers. Hey, your quote unquote retirement readiness score is 66 out of 100. What's that going to do to most people? It's going to scare the bejesus out of them. They're going to close it and say, I might as well just give up.
Yeah.
And so it was working through that with them to understand that, hey, whether you are someone who makes this much or this much, as long as we know you and where you want to go, we can develop that roadmap together.
Oh, and I love doing that. Like to see someone's confidence grow because we solved the equation of what they really should be saving towards. Because we back into the number, we use Social Security, we use what other savings they have, we use their income, and then they actually see, okay, this is my goal. And not that there's just one solid number and things change and there's a huge part of the tax strategy that has to go into that. Mm-hmm. But to see someone know that they actually can stop working if they want to, it's fascinating. I feel like the people that have more money saved have less confidence. It blows my mind how often I'm meeting with a physician who has more than enough to retire today mm-hmm. and feels completely unready. They're so scared that they don't dare have the thought of actually retiring.
Yeah.
And maybe retirement's not a good thing for them. Maybe that like physically and psychologically, like they need to have some sort of work. So find that balance, but financially they have the means to do it, but they don't believe that. It's so crazy, you know? And then on the other end of the spectrum, people that haven't saved couldn't care less. And they're the ones traveling more and they're the ones enjoying their life more because they're just like, I'm never going to make it. So let's just, things will work out. It's amazing, you know? So
and being a planner as I am, and my wife is more of a, you know, off the cuff, let's see what happens kind of person, compliment each other well. You want to take that, what you do, and give that to everyone because you want them to see, hey, you're not as far behind as you think you are, or hey, you're in a better position than you might think you are. But then the question that always comes after that is, well, how or why? And so you could meet with someone, like you mentioned. I remember meeting with one of the top 5, I think, cardiac surgeons in the country, one-on-one meeting. Everyone's warning me about how difficult this meeting is going to be because he's a very intelligent guy, etc. And yeah, Jake, it was one of my favorite meetings because he looks at me and says, Joey, I can perform the most complex heart surgeries out there, but when it comes to reading this investment menu in front of me, it might as well be in a foreign language. I don't know if what all these mean is going to be enough for me to live and to essentially leave some kind of legacy. And that's, you know, the other conversation that I love having with people is, you know, if you're not going to spend all your money, what do you have in mind? And not one of these meetings, as you know, you could tell from our discussion, not one of them is the same. That's the best part.
Yeah, that's just so true that some of the smartest people, and that's why I love working with physicians because they are super sharp And it's funny where they get their information. So one of the main questions we always ask them is, what do you read? Where are you getting your guidance to how you make investment decisions? And that tells us a ton. I mean, we get a variety of different answers, but that tells our team, okay, this is how they're going to approach it. They're a one Vanguard fund kind of person. Okay, let's explore that a little bit and talk about history and kind of the academics behind why that makes sense or why it doesn't make sense and how to watch out for different pitfalls. But that's the key. I think most advisors come in with an agenda, say, all right, no, just, you're going to go here. This is our model. This is our managed account. Answer these questions, because they're trying to like scale, but you can't, I mean, you have to have that conversation. You have to listen. And the more that you listen, the more you learn, and the more you can reverse engineer what they're trying to accomplish. Some people don't care. Some people want every last dollar to be spent by them. And some people want to leave this big legacy. Well, that's a very different investment approach and tax approach. So there just isn't a scalable way to do this with just technology. In my opinion, I just don't think it's something that will ever be 100% human-free interaction, managing your money. You're going to need help somewhere.
Totally agree. And quite honestly, that was another fear of mine with this concept was, is an app or a website going to take the place of what we're trying to accomplish? Because when an employer says to me, all right, how do we know if you were successful, or should we have retirement rock stars back? Like you said, it's all about those outcomes. What do participation rates do? What did the average deferral rate do? Things of that nature. But at the end of the day, what gets people or gets employers the most is when they see their employees excited for things that they never expected. And Jake, just going back to what you mentioned, participants will throw out a lot of information about how they got to their investment strategy or otherwise. And then someone will say, I worked for UPS for like 11 years back in the day, and I've got a small pension. I don't know how that factors into the puzzle, but with that technology, now we can take that number they know they have, plug it into that system, which gives us that instant gratification with them. Yeah. But the person would have never done that had they not sat in one-on-one.
Totally. And then that adds to the psychology behind their next decision. Now they have more confidence, and now they start to think, I can do this. Like, I really can get to where I'm happy and feel confident in backing off, focusing on accumulating, right? So tell me, I want to know, like, retirement rock stars, like, how does someone hire retirement rock stars? Is that kind of the goal? Is it like a plan sponsor would hire you and I don't know, I guess it's just you right now, right? So to come in and provide education, or would that be an advisor hire, bring you in? How does that all come together? Just, I know it's still kind of early in it, but what is your goal?
Yeah, so my initial thought, and I'm referring back to my conversation with JD a year ago, was employers. That was going to be the main focus for me, because I thought that was the direct route, if you will. The advisor piece we talked about being, I was concerned about that, but fast forward to now, all the interest in retirement rock stars, I shouldn't say all, 90% of that interest has come from advisors saying, this is a cool concept, tell me more about it. Is this something you do to partner with advisors? There's not nearly as many direct clients out there as there used to be. Yeah. And so most of the growth and the momentum that I've been just so incredibly humbled to see has been from the advisor community.
So who's actually paying for it then? Is it the advisors paying, or the plan sponsor?
It's a little bit of both. I would say half and half. It's the advisor, taking the fee for retirement rock stars and taking out of their compensation, paying directly. A lot of times, if the employer is paying for it, it'll come from the ERISA budget, which I think makes perfect sense. So they don't have to write a hard dollar check. Yeah.
But is it per participant?
No, flat fee.
Flat fee. So is it flat per, like, any plan's the same price, or is there metrics that go into it?
It's going to be every client, depending on how many days that they want to have education. So
it's kind of a time thing.
Exactly. If they have 60 people that interested and they're going to need 4 days of one-on-ones, the price will vary based on economies of scale.
Hmm.
And that's something, quite candidly, I'm continuing to kind of chisel away at to find out the best way to approach that piece, to continue giving the most opportunity for retirement rock stars, but knowing what the market's doing. So an example of that is I wanted to know what Fidelity, Empower, Voya, et cetera, charged if a client called them and said, hey, I need someone to come out here and do education for me. What do you
Yeah.
charge? So getting a pulse on that versus what we were doing that I would think is above and beyond that some folks have the capability of doing.
So have you seen more traction kind of with the larger enterprise level stuff, or more like the advisors that maybe have 10 plans and just are focused on individuals and kind of want you to manage the education there and let you know if there's rollover and then they jump in? Is that kind of what you're
It,
seeing?
it has
Or
been more specialist driven, Jake.
specials?
Folks
Okay.
that have big books of 401k business, and it varies from not having dedicated persons, so to speak, at the record keeper to go out there and see that. So they want to try to essentially create that, and a value the advisor adds to their client then is saying, hey, we have a vetted out third party, fully licensed, that is going to come and sit with the employees, that's agnostic, that can have
Yeah.
discussions with them about just about anything. So a bulk of the interest has come from more of that specialist route, but definitely a few one-offs that have a handful of plans going, this is not really my forte, education something, there's so many ways to structure it, can you help out?
And so you'll go in for those like 4 days and do all of the one-on-ones.
Yeah, that's the goal, as things continue to grow and hopefully the business, the model will grow as the concept builds. Yeah, that's the familiarity with me, with the brand, and knowing who they're going to get to me is it's super important.
So basically your prep is to come in, know their plan really well, and then just listen to what their needs are personally. And then you put together a report for that advisor team or advisor. Basically, this is what happened. This is what we found. This is who needs follow up, and then kind of hand it back off and on to the next one. Or do you like come back every year? Kind of fill me in on that.
The goal is certainly to make it recurring. Certainly
Okay.
to have it where the advisor got good feedback from that employer. But there's always what I call the takeaway. What did we accomplish in that day or two that we spent with the employees?
Yeah.
And showing the advisor, we did this many contribution increases, we did this many reallocations, this many beneficiary reviews and updates to see, are those meetings effective? Are they moving the needle? And are they going to be something that employer looks as valuable, from a
Yeah.
benefit standpoint?
Yeah. So you're not only getting metrics just for the advisor team, but also for the advisor team to look good to the plan sponsor because you're showing some real results, hard data saying this is what we did and this is why this is value. So the actual costs pretty much, outweighs itself. If there's like accounts that need to be, like say there's other IRAs or other trust accounts or other securities, how do those get handled? Is that just you hand them off to the advisor and then their team would do it, or
Yeah,
what do you do there?
it's very, very situational. Some advisors do want complete control over rollovers, for various reasons. But what I've noticed again in this demographic is not a lot of retirement plan specialists want to focus on the individual wealth management as much as maybe they used to.
Yeah.
So what I tell them, the minimum we're going to do when we discuss rollovers with a participant is just do a cost analysis. What are the fees based on their holdings and otherwise where they're at versus where they could be here, and just make it, very objective as opposed to leaving gray area in there, and giving that employee the information that they need to then make a decision.
Interesting. Yeah, I like it. I mean, we did a bit. I'm just thinking we did a bit on a plan with 3,500 participants, which really isn't our niche. It's a good friend of mine. It was HR, and she still is. We haven't got it yet, but it's been an ongoing kind of conversation. And a huge part of what they were lacking is they had basically the current advisor came in for 1 day a month. So those times would book out immediately, and they had 3 locations, even some international employees. And so, which were American, but they lived abroad. So a huge part of our proposal was literally having someone in their office 3 times a month in one day in each location to really increase that one-on-one time. But for to us put the resources in to do that, we were still saving them money because their fees really were not where they should be. But it was a different model that we had to set up as far as pricing from our side because of those resources we had to commit to that. But it was going to be an interesting push because we don't really have a whole lot of that now. I pretty much handle all that one-on-one because we're dealing with really small headcount groups with high asset class, so it's a different niche. So I'm able to scale that, but man, these bigger ones, that's tough because you don't have so much time in the day to have these meetings.
It's the best compliment / the most overwhelming to get a phone call post meeting that says, "Hey dude, good news. Meeting got great feedback from the employer. Here's the other news. They have 75 more employees that want to do one-on-ones in the next week." And you're going, "Oh, all right." And how I looked at that, I mean, it's a blessing. Let me be very, very clear about that. That is what Retirement Rockstars was built to do, was to get people comfortable where they got excited to want to continue to do this. But when I think about from the employer all the way up to the advisor, the employee to the advisor, if the employee is excited, the employer knows it, the employer relays it to the advisor, and that makes that relationship more solidified, stickier, knowing that there's more hands in the pot, so to speak, but we know who's doing what and how we're going to be taken care of. And that explosion the last 6 months, I never saw that coming.
That's awesome. No, it totally makes sense what you're doing. I think a ton of advisors would really benefit from talking to you about this because their time, their efforts could be used in a lot other places. And this would be a tremendous value to bring without feeling threatened, and that's what there's certain record keepers I don't like because I kind of feel threatened because they're constantly looking for rollovers to go to them outside of anything we do. And so it's like, I shy away from those. And this is a great way to, bring it together, have that help, but have it independent and really help build more value that you bring as the advisor rather than feel like you're offloading it because there's only so much time in the day. That's cool. Well, I'm excited for you. We have to talk more about this. I'm going to make a bigger push with a couple of these bigger clients that I more want to help them because I know their HR teams really well. And I know they could get better. I know that the participants they should get better. And that's kind of where my motivation is more than anything, is just to see these people that have no clue, what's going on because they don't even get a chance to schedule time to talk to anybody because it's not enough there. So
you're absolutely right.
They're stuck with the calculators.
And brother, you said it at the beginning of this conversation, where our industry has gone over the last 10 years. Our goal is to make things better. Our industry has gotten so much better over the last 10 years, and it's got a ways to go as far as I'm concerned. But there's more time, attention, focus, specialty, you name it, on 401ks and retirement plans in general right now, which gets me excited because this momentum is going to continue as the generation behind me, when I mention Social Security, just kind of laughs and rolls their eyes. It's going to become increasingly important as the word pension doesn't get mentioned anymore. Defined contribution, but if each one of us can impact any one participant or employer in a positive way, then that's a win.
Totally. And that's what's unique is I think in the next 15 years, like was it 2034 when Social Security is supposed to reassess everything and it's going to run out of reserves or whatever, like it's going to get real serious fast when people are like, oh, hold on, I can't factor that in anymore. You know what I mean? Like illustrations for how you can actually live off of your money is going to dramatically change because you don't have that safety net so much anymore. So we got a big job to do. I'm super excited to be part of it and influence people to do the right thing. To wrap it up though, I don't even know what band you're in. Tell me the drumming, what band was it and how long, are you still part of that? Do you still do different gigs or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, so right now, as we speak, I play in a cover band that is late 80s, 90s, early 2000 rock tunes.
Okay.
With my 63-year-old uncle on guitar who just shreds like crazy. And we just have fun. I mean, it's, bands like Creed, Pearl Jam, Def Leppard, you name it, stuff like that, some of the big rock hits. We try to play out once a month for fun. We practice in my basement once a week. It's a blast. Um, a week after I graduated college back in 2007, I played in a band called Inept. A terrible name for a band, obviously. But the band's name was Inept. We signed a deal with a Japanese record label in 2007, and we recorded a full-length record that is still out on iTunes. And it is, to this day, it is the musical, I'll call it just document, musical thing that I'm most proud of, because so much went into making that record that every time I listen back to it, I just think how fortunate we were to get to do that, tour all over the country. It's a different and tough life, there's no doubt. But I'm absolutely beyond fortunate that I got to do that for a portion of my career.
What's the name of the album?
It's called So Much Between Us.
Okay. I'm gonna check it out.
And for anyone watching,
Oh,
just
there it is.
hold it against me. It's a little harder edge alternative rock, but it was in that era. It was the Vans Warped Tour era.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun to be a part of. There it is.
I found it. I found Amazon. Sweet. No, that's what I grew up with. Like, I mean, I got all into the whole punk stuff and pretended to skate and all those things in the 90s.
Well, and Jake, to wrap it up, the funniest way these two lives intersected happened last year. 2 years ago. I was meeting with a client in Chicago, and this young guy came up to me, and he was waiting to talk to me. There was a lot of people, and he goes, "Hey man, can I ask you a question totally unrelated to all this 401k?" So I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Were you the drummer in Inept?" I said, "Yeah, I was." And I thought of all things, like, if someone paid that guy to say that, thank you, because it made me feel like $1 million. But it was the first time those two worlds literally crossed. It was just a cool feeling.
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think I'll see anybody saying, "Hey, were you a guy that ran cross country?" It's never gonna happen. My talents aren't that big, but that's cool. I love it. I wish I had that talent. I've got my kids in piano, hoping that one day one of them will surprise me. But they're talented in a lot of ways. So drumming, it was such a cool thing. I'm glad you enjoy that and brought it together with 401ks, and I love it. You're an amazing guy. I really am excited to continue to get to know you better and hopefully get through COVID and see each other one day. I love Chicago, so I want any reason to get back to Chicago. Every time I go there, I have like a very short window, so I get to see like hardly anything. But
it's going to depend on our weather, it looks like, too, because if you come for 48 hours, the weather could go from 60 to 110 and all the way back.
Yeah.
So, well, for if anybody out there is planning on doing Excel, if it still happens in Vegas in the fall, I'm hoping that's when all the group will get.
We're all going to come together. We're going to have quite the party together.
Absolutely. I appreciate this and you more than you know, Dick. Thank you so much, brother. Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to leave as a party message for advisors, wholesalers, like that? I don't know, words of wisdom, things that you would just tell yourself 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that you wish you would have done now or back then?
How important it is to make an impact on those employees. Yes, it's important to make an impact on the committee and the decision makers, but spending key time with those employees, making them feel good and excited about that benefit they have, you'd be so surprised how fast that shoots right up the ladder and kind of just spreads across. So the more an advisor or whoever has the ability to bring in a resource where they can touch participants more to help them, that momentum is going to continue. And if any of this interests you, just want to learn more about the concept of what it is, Twitter handle is @401krockstar, and the Instagram is @retirementrockstars. So shoot me a message anytime. I always, as you know, love to talk 401k plans and be happy to talk further about this with anyone who's interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Joey. It's so
Appreciate
good
it.
to talk to you. I'm sure we'll do a few more of these and dive a little deeper into other topics. So this is a good intro. Thanks for spending the time, and we will we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.